In the far reaches of the northern forests, long before the world was filled with cities and roads, a giant lumberjack named Paul Bunyan was born. Some say Paul was born on a snowy night, with a fierce blizzard sweeping across the land. As soon as he took his first breath, the winds roared and the trees bent with awe, for Paul was no ordinary man. At just 3 days old, he was already larger than any grown adult. His parents, shocked by his size, realized they had a child unlike any other, one who would grow into a giant of incredible strength and spirit. As Paul grew, so did his enormous appetite and unrelenting desire to explore the forests and rivers around him. By the time he was 18, he could fell an entire forest in a single swing of his axe, and he could carry logs that weighed more than entire houses. He soon became famous throughout the land as the most powerful lumberjack to ever live, and his legend spread far and wide. But no giant could ever be truly great without a companion. And so, as Paul ventured deeper into the woods, he came across a giant blue ox, larger than any ox the world had ever seen. This was Babe, a creature so majestic and strong that even Paul couldn't believe his eyes. Together, they formed an unbreakable bond, ready to carve out their place in history. It wasn't long before Paul and Babe's adventures took them to the banks of what would become one of the great rivers of North America. They had been chopping trees all day long, and Paul, in his usual way, grew impatient. "This land is too dry, too still," he grumbled. "We need a river to bring it to life." Without a second thought, Paul picked up his giant axe and swung it at the earth with all his might. The ground rumbled as if it were alive, and a massive chasm appeared, stretching for miles. As the waters of a distant lake began to pour into the newly formed gorge, a river was born. This river flowed with such force that it shaped valleys and hills along its course, making it one of the most powerful rivers in the world. Babe, with his massive hooves, stomped around the area, widening the riverbanks with each step. Paul and Babe, now partners in both labor and adventure, marveled at the river they had created. It would come to be known as the Great River, a symbol of their unstoppable strength and the land they had shaped together. Having crafted a river, Paul and Babe turned their sights to the surrounding land. They knew that to truly make the land their own, they needed to create the greatest forest the world had ever seen. As Paul began to chop down trees with enormous swings of his axe, the ground shook with every strike. One swing, and a tree the size of a small building came crashing down. Babe helped by using his mighty hooves to uproot the biggest trees, dragging them across the land like twigs. The forest grew quickly, with every new tree planted by Paul and Babe. But it wasn't just about planting trees. Paul had a dream of a forest that stretched as far as the eye could see, a forest where every tree was perfect, tall and mighty. Together, they created a forest so vast that it became a legend in itself. Some say you could stand at the edge of the forest and see it stretching to the horizon, a true testament to Paul and Babe's work. As they ventured across the land, Paul and Babe's adventures took them to the highlands. Here, the land was dry, and Paul could feel the air lacking the refreshment of water. "We need lakes," he declared. "The land is too parched." And so, the pair set out to carve out the Great Lakes. Using his axe, Paul swung it with such power that the earth trembled. A series of deep basins appeared where there had once been nothing, and rainstorms soon filled the hollows with water. Babe, using his great size, dug out the deepest parts of the lakes, stomping the earth with his hooves until the ground was soft and pliable. Soon, 5 massive lakes stood before them, each one brimming with water. They sparkled under the sun, vast and deep, with shores that stretched for miles. The Great Lakes became a landmark for travelers and adventurers alike, a reminder of the legendary power of Paul and Babe. One winter, as the winds howled through the forest, Paul and Babe found themselves stuck in a particularly fierce snowstorm. The blizzard was so powerful that it seemed to bury the landscape, and even the great Paul Bunyan struggled to keep up. He quickly realized that the storm was more than just weather. It was a test of his strength. "I've faced many challenges before," Paul grumbled, "but this storm may be my greatest adversary yet." Determined not to let the storm win, Paul swung his axe with all his might, cutting down entire trees and using them to build an enormous wall of wood. Babe, with his strength and skill, helped Paul carry massive logs, creating a shelter that would protect them from the snow. The storm raged on for days, but Paul and Babe held strong. They knew that together they could weather any storm, and soon enough the skies cleared, revealing a breathtaking snow-covered landscape. The snowstorm was a challenge they had conquered together, and it would become a famous tale of their resilience. One of the most remarkable stories of Paul and Babe is how they unintentionally created the Grand Canyon. The legend tells that while Paul was cutting through the mountains to make way for new forests, he tripped and swung his axe wildly in the air. The impact was so great that it carved a deep gorge into the earth, a canyon so massive that it became a natural wonder. Babe, ever the loyal companion, tried to help by stomping the earth with his hooves, but the canyon only deepened. Together, they marveled at the unintended creation. Though it was not their plan, the Grand Canyon became one of the most awe-inspiring places on Earth, a testament to their strength and an unforgettable part of their journey. It was early one misty morning when Paul and Babe wandered farther from the familiar forests and rivers they had shaped, driven by a curiosity that neither could resist. They had heard whispers of a mountain, tall and lonely, said to rise higher than any peak they had seen before. It was a place so remote that few had dared to venture close. The mountain's very existence was a mystery, its top hidden in the clouds, as though the heavens themselves kept it secret. But Paul Bunyan, with his insatiable desire for adventure, could not ignore the call of such an elusive place. With Babe by his side, Paul set out for the mountain. As the two made their way through unfamiliar lands, they began to see signs of the mountain's incredible size. Trees grew thinner, rocks grew larger, and the air became thinner with every step. Soon they entered an untouched wilderness, where no human had ever set foot. Even the animals seemed to look at Paul and Babe in awe, as if the land itself was not accustomed to such great creatures. The climb was unlike anything Paul had ever experienced. The mountain was so steep and jagged that even Paul's massive strength struggled to keep pace. But undeterred, he used his enormous axe to chop away at the rock, clearing the way for both himself and Babe. With each swing, the mountain quaked beneath them, and the sound of cracking stone echoed for miles. Babe, never one to be left behind, helped in his own way. He used his colossal hooves to dig footholds into the rocky surface, his strength making the climb slightly easier. The two worked together like a well-oiled machine, their bond allowing them to conquer obstacles that would have stopped any ordinary traveler. The higher they climbed, the more breathtaking the view became. They could see for miles, the rivers they had shaped, the forests they had planted, and the lakes they had carved from the earth. But it wasn't until they reached the summit that the true marvel of the mountain revealed itself. At the peak, Paul and Babe stood in awe. Below them was a sprawling landscape, dotted with the remnants of their past adventures. Forests, lakes, and rivers that stretched farther than the eye could see. But the mountain itself was even more magnificent. It was as if it had been designed specifically for giants. Its slopes were wide enough to accommodate their immense size, and its stones seemed to call out to them as if it had been waiting for them to arrive. At the summit, Paul took a deep breath and swung his axe with all his might. The force of his strike left a deep mark in the stone, a lasting tribute to their journey. Babe, too, made his mark, stomping his massive hooves into the earth and leaving an impression that would be there forever. They both marveled at the beauty and silence of the mountain. For a moment the world seemed to stop. No more rivers rushed by, no more trees swayed in the wind, and no more animals roamed the land. It was just Paul, Babe, and the endless sky above. It was as if they had reached the edge of the world itself. The legend of the lost mountain of giants would grow over the years, and soon travelers from all over would speak of the mysterious peak. They would say that only the most daring adventurers could reach its summit, and they would wonder how Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox had managed to conquer it. But in truth, no one would ever fully understand the bond that had made their journey possible. For Paul and Babe, the Lost Mountain was more than just a physical challenge. It was a testament to their unbreakable friendship, their shared determination, and their willingness to face the unknown. They had reached the highest peak, and nothing could stand in their way. One day, as Paul and Babe were traveling through the plains, they encountered another legendary duo, a giant bear and a swift deer. The two animals boasted of their speed, claiming that they could outrun any lumberjack or ox. Paul, never one to back down from a challenge, laughed heartily and declared, "Why not settle this with a race?" The race began, with Paul and Babe facing off against the bear and deer. The earth trembled beneath their feet as they took off at full speed. Despite their enormous size, Paul and Babe were quick and nimble, easily keeping up with the faster animals. The race stretched across hills and rivers, but in the end, it was clear that no one could beat Paul and Babe's speed and strength. Though they won, Paul and Babe humbly congratulated their competitors, proving that their greatness wasn't just in their size, but in their good-natured spirit. As the years passed and the world around them continued to change, Paul and Babe found themselves standing at the edge of their greatest creation, the land they had shaped together. The rivers still flowed, the forests still stood tall, and the lakes shimmered under the sun. Yet something felt different. The forests, once untamed and wild, now seemed to echo with the voices of the people who had come to live among them. The trees, which had once been untouched, were now being carefully tended and harvested. The rivers were no longer just the domain of giants. They had become the lifeblood of the land's new inhabitants. Paul could feel it deep within him. Time was moving on and the world was evolving. It wasn't the world he had known when he first set out to shape the land, but it was still a world he had helped create. He and Babe had brought life to the wilderness, and now they had to face the fact that their time of adventure was coming to an end. "Babe," Paul said one evening as they gazed out over the landscape they had formed together, "I think it's time for us to take our final journey." Babe let out a low, rumbling sound in response. His eyes filled with understanding. It had always been the two of them, and wherever they went, they faced every challenge together. But now, it seemed as though their path was leading them somewhere new. The final adventure wasn't about shaping new lands or felling more trees. This time it was about leaving a legacy. It was about creating something that would stand long after they were gone. A mark that would endure as a symbol of their strength, friendship, and the vast, untamed spirit of the wilderness they had once known. And so, Paul and Babe set out on their last journey, traveling deeper into the heart of the land they had helped form. They came across the great river once more, and Paul paused to admire it. The river, now full and flowing, seemed to hum with life. "This river," Paul said, "is a part of us, Babe. It will carry our story forever." They continued on, eventually reaching the base of a great mountain, the mountain that had come to symbolize their triumphs and struggles. Paul raised his axe one last time, not to chop, but to carve his name and Babe's into the stone at the foot of the mountain. As Paul swung the axe, a deep rumble echoed through the earth. The ground shook, and a strange light filled the air. It was as though the mountain itself had come alive, accepting their mark. And in that moment, Paul and Babe knew their adventure was complete. Their story had been written into the very land itself, and no one could erase it. With a final, contented sigh, Paul turned to Babe. "We've done what we came here to do, old friend. The land will remember us." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the land, Paul and Babe stood together one last time, gazing out over the landscape they had shaped. The trees they had planted, the lakes they had created, and the rivers they had carved. All were still there, still as wild and untamed as they had been in the beginning. But now they were part of something greater, a legacy that would last forever.